I just realized that my mic was muted. Let's do this with some sound this time, huh? This is good stuff. All right, so we're on creation part two. Oh, I can't believe I just did that. All right, we're on creation part two. Last week we covered 7 literal days, right? And a day was established as a 24-hour period. So we know for sure, because of sunrise, sunset, we know for sure that creation takes place in 7 days. We have creation of all of the objects in the universe, the land, the ocean, the atmosphere, that what we call the heavens, right? The rest of the universe. We have the creation of seasons. We have the creation of linear time in human form, not God's time. Human times, totally different, totally separate. We have wind because of seasons, so we have weather change, angle of the sun change, and things like that, and tide. And then we have the creation of mathematics with the rotation of the earth, with tidal changes, with wind changes, months, calendar months, and knowing when a season rolls around again. That is basically the creation of math. So math is the universal language. Everybody on the planet speaks different languages. Some people speak multiple languages, but everybody speaks math in the same language. 2 plus 2 is always 4. It doesn't matter where you go in the world. And then, so that was that's the 7 days of creation and an overview. And the reason why we have to remind ourselves every single time we do one of these, the reason why this is so important is because if there are mistakes in the beginning of the Bible, or if there are things in the beginning of the Bible that you cannot believe, then what else in the Bible is not true? So we have to be sure that we believe the creation model. We have to be sure that we approach it with a full, level-headed understanding that is based on God's wisdom. And we have to accept it. Because if we don't accept it, then how can we possibly accept the fact that Christ died for us on the cross? Okay, so this week we're going to do 5 verses. We're going to do Genesis 1, verses 20 through 25 only. That's it. And let's get into this because this is some really good stuff. So, starting in verse 20, it says, "Then God said, 'Let the waters teem with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth in the open expanse of the heavens.'" So we're on day 5. Day 4 is already ended, right? We're on day 5, and we have basically the filling of the oceans, all of the animals in the ocean that live in the water, and then all of the animals that live in the air. You know what I mean when I say that. And I find this interesting because from a logical point of view, it's absolutely beautiful. As you and I, or lizards, or ants, or elephants move around on the earth, we are moving through a fluid that is air. But our main mode of transport is the ground, right? We push against the ground with our feet and we move. Fish and birds push against a fluid to move. So God made both of these at the same time, right? The birds can swim or fly through the air, and the fish can fly or swim through the ocean, and both of those are a fluid. So we just have that from an interesting logical point of view. So he fills the ocean and he fills the air with birds, right? In verse 21 it says, "God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarmed after their kind, and every winged bird after its kind, and God saw that it was good." As we said last time, when we see it is good, meaning it serves God's purpose. So the very interesting thing about verse 21 is the translation of the word from the original Hebrew into English in some of your Bibles says whale. Okay? It's not whales. Whales in the Bible are referred to as big fish. The only reason why we as human beings separate whales from fish is because whales breathe air. Fish have gills, right? But to just an unmattering way, if it lives in the water and it swims, generally speaking, we call it a fish. So, like in the book of Jonah, the whale is referred to as a big fish, but big fish, meaning large fish, are whales in biblical speak. Here, the root of the word is tan, and the actual word is, I think I'm saying this right, is tannin, right? And tan means monster or serpent, and tannin, which is the actual word that is translated here, means sea dragon. So stuff like this I love because we have so changed the perception of the earth because we believe we know more than God does, right? So if I were to say to you that, there used to be sea dragons, you'd be like, no, there weren't. We've never seen a sea dragon fossil. We've never seen one wash up on a beach. Nobody's ever caught one in a net. You have no idea what you're talking about. You're dumb as a box of rocks. The Bible specifically states in verse 21, God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarmed after their kind. So God made sea monsters. And what I find interesting is if we go back in history, we're going to get into this later on, but when people recorded stuff, like if they drew it, which was one of the most common ways for recording, because most people didn't know how to read and write for a very long period. And only a short period of our history do people actually know how to read and write. And I would say it's only been about 200 years that the majority of the population has been able to read or write. So people communicated through drawings. They didn't make stuff up. You can't draw something that doesn't exist. It's impossible, right? And so, and the reason why I say that you can draw something that doesn't exist, it's totally possible. I could draw a three-headed monster right now that has car wheels for feet, right? But the thing is for us, drawing is not a huge resource taker. We have a bunch of free time. We can go to the store and buy markers. We can buy poster board. It's all very cheap, right? I could go to the dollar store right now and I could rack up and I could draw you all sorts of ugly drawings because I can't draw worth a flip. Back then, ink and paper were extremely expensive. They didn't horse around. So when they recorded something, they recorded legitimate things that people have experienced. There's a tile mosaic that we'll get into a lot later on in this series that I think is one of the most important finds in modern human history. But just to show you what I'm talking about, hopefully I get this to work tonight. I've already messed up on the sound. I'm talking about a map like this, right? So if I show you this here, and this came from earthlymission.com, it's just an example that I found. You see this giant sea serpent eating this ship, and behind the giant sea serpent is a huge kind of another big fish, and then there's either some whirlpool thing or maybe some other kind of monster there. And you see there's some strange looking monsters on the land on the right hand side over there. But that's an example of somebody recording what somebody has witnessed, what has been described to them. And all of these old sea maps have these sea monsters on them. There's giant octopus, giant squid, giant sea dragons. I have to tell you that if it is in the scripture, it happened. And just because we can't prove it now doesn't mean that it never existed. And for us to take that approach, like if, I can't prove it so it doesn't exist, that's really kind of highbrow and cocky of us and doesn't keep us in our prospective places. I live on, a 20-acre farm thing, whatever, really just 20 acres of land, but there are buildings on the property that I have taken down that there is no remnants of. We used to have a smokehouse on our property. You could not come to my house now and find where the smokehouse was. That does not mean the smokehouse didn't exist. It just means that we can't find it. So a lot of these things, when we talk about creation, when we talk about God's true word, we have to remember we've got to come from a position that God is wiser than we are, and then approach things from that perspective. Okay, so your evolutionary scientists that started in the late 1800s, they've only been going for 140 years, and in that 140 years, their argument of evolution has not gotten any better. There's microevolution, right? And we're going to talk about that tonight. But there's no macroevolution. Nothing has changed, and we start to look for answers for things that just go against the design of God, and it makes absolutely no sense. So there were sea monsters. They were probably pretty cool. Verse 22. God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth." Right? So he gave them a method of multiplication, of having babies. Some animals do it really weird, right? Like coral, it just like shoots out its seeds all throughout the ocean, and they land, and they either fertilize or they don't. Fish lay eggs in a little nest. Seahorses carry their babies around in the male's stomach or something weird like that. Whatever. But every animal has the ability to replicate. Every animal has the ability to have a baby. Procreate is the proper word. All right. So, verse 23, it says, "There was evening and there was morning a fifth day." So that's the end of day 5. So day 5, we have the mountains, we have the beach, we have the ocean, there's going to be some lakes, there's going to be probably some glaciers or snow or frozen stuff or something. Well, there's not hasn't yet because hasn't rained yet. But, the earth is fully formed, and now there's birds in the air, and there's animals in the ocean. Crabs and whales and tuna fish and everything, right? In verse 24 it says this, it says, "Then God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures after their kind, cattle and creeping things and beasts of the earth after their kind. And it was so. God made the beasts of the earth after their kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creeps on the ground after its kind, and God saw that it was good." So there's that God saw it was good again. Now, what word did I just say like 84 times? Is the word kind. So we go back to verse 20 again, real quick. I think it's 20. No, verse 21. "God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarmed after their kind, and every winged bird after its kind." So here is the basic explanation of classes of animals. And so what we've done today is we've turned it into kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. And then we say, like, the swimming iguanas in the Galapagos are a totally different animal than the iguanas that live in Florida in the palm trees. And the reason why we say that is because they're a different color in the Galapagos. Because in the Galapagos they can swim and eat algae out of the ocean. And, we don't see iguanas swimming in the ocean in Florida. And it doesn't make any sense, because you can take an iguana from the Galapagos and you can mate it with an iguana from Florida, and you can have iguana babies. So they're not different species. And this becomes really important that you understand this. And the reason why it's important is because you are taught that we came from apes, and apes came from mice, and mice came from a tadpole, and a tadpole came from, some comet crashing into Earth and forming some primordial soup. It's all a bunch of hogwash. I mean, the scientists will tell you that cows, whatever was the precedent to cows, went into the water, turned into whales, and came back out and turned into cows. What? No. You see, a cow and a whale are two totally different animals. And you can't breed a cow and a whale, as far as I know. I'm pretty sure you can't. So they're not of the same kind. So this progression that they push, that, one thing turned into another, turned into another, turned into another, doesn't really work. So out of this bit here, one of the things that I really wanted to focus on tonight and just take time to show you was the idea that kinds is a far better solution than speciation, which is what we're taught. And so the way species work is you have a genome, and the genome has a specific string of information in it. And that string of information is a certain length. And some animals' genomes are longer than others. Humans are 23. I hope I got this right. And I think like apes are like 46 or 48. And the idea behind evolution is that the information in the string is changed. Now, from a logical perspective, if something is created out of nothing, then the only thing that could do that is God. So you can't have toads breeding and then turn into a raccoon, because the information is not there and it's never going to get there, right? And so what you have is this idea of universal progress, that things, like man started out as apes, and then we started to walk on 2 feet, and then we started to stand up straight and stop dragging our knuckles, and we learned to get haircuts, and all of that is just nonsense. So this idea that the genome can be added to and subtracted to create new animals is a broken theory. Now, kinds simply states that all of the animals in a specific kind have the same information, it's just in different order, or different things are highlighted from it. So I was trying to think of a way to show you this and have it make sense without you getting all confused, right? So I've got this picture here of a xylophone. Okay? Now, you see here, xylophone will always be a xylophone. Like, it doesn't matter what you do to it. You could take the red bars and switch them with the blue bars, and the green bars and switch them with the yellow, and you could put the long ones in between the short ones, or you could put all the short ones on the left hand side and all the long ones on the right, or whatever. You could change the order in any way you wanted. You could even change the paint on the bars, but that will always be a xylophone. That is the idea behind kinds. The information is always there, it's just rearranged in a different pattern, or pieces of it are accentuated more than others. So how do I know, and how can I show you this idea of kinds? Well, one of the easiest ways for us to look at kinds is to think about dogs. Okay? So I could have a Great Dane breed with a Chihuahua. I'm not sure which way would work out better. You'd either have a giant Chihuahua or you'd have a tiny Great Dane, or some mix of the both, right? Miniature Great Dane would be kind of funny. Giant Chihuahua would probably be pretty worrisome. I've met very few Chihuahuas in my life that are nice. But all dogs can interbreed. So they're all a dog. But here's the crazy thing. Wolves and coyotes can interbreed. Right? Wolves and dogs can interbreed. Dingoes and dogs can interbreed. So we have this thing where a dingo and a wolf are two completely different species and separated by continents, but they still are made up of the same xylophone. So I wanted to show you a couple examples of these because I think this is kind of fun. So here's one here. This is a liger. It's a lion and a tiger. I think this is a male tiger and a female lion make a liger. I could have it backwards. I don't really care. And then if we look at this, this is a Tygon. It's the same thing in reverse. It's a whichever one male or female tiger and a male or female lion. Okay? They live on totally different continents, never ever see each other, are total enemies, yet they both can reproduce. So they have to be of the same kind. I got some other crazy ones here for you cat lovers out there, which I'll never understand, but here you go. Here's a bobcat and a lynx. And a bobcat can mate with a house cat, and a lynx can mate with a house cat too. So we know bobcats, lynx, and house cats and cervets are all of the same kind because they can all interbreed. And let's do, I love this one. I love donkeys. So zonkey is pretty cool, right? That's a zebra and a donkey. Not only can you breed those, but they can have babies, where like a mule oftentimes is sterile, which is a horse and a donkey. Then you have something almost as cool, which is a zorse, which is a horse and a zebra, right? And if they can breed, they must be of the same kind. And so you start to get this idea that our teaching of evolution has got to be flawed. The creation model that God speaks about here, where He created all of the animals at one time and they're all different, right? Obviously there's enough genetic code in them to create the different variations. So a horse and a zebra are actually the same animal. They just have different paint. Their xylophone bars are in just different order. And that came as microevolution, meaning the animals that were horses that were in Africa, some part of them got better and better at having stripes because they were less likely to get eaten by lions. That is not evolution. That is microevolution. That means a species has changed based on a locality because one version of that string of information is more successful than others. The string of information has still not changed. You can bring that zebra over here, and I can breed it with a horse, and we can have a zorse. I would actually kind of like to have a zorse. I think they're cool looking. So there's a bunch of these. I mean, this isn't, this is just a tiny portion of them, but you have like a jaglion, which is a jaguar and a lion. You have a jeep, not with a J, but with a G. That's goats and sheep. You can crossbreed those. I mentioned coy wolf, coyote and wolf. There's some really ridiculous ones, like I can't even imagine how this happens, but a cama, which is a camel and a llama. They can have babies. And then you have from the ocean, there's in SeaWorld, I think it was in Japan, I'm not 100% sure, but one of the SeaWorld locations before SeaWorld was like shut down, they had a false whale and a bottlenose dolphin breed, and those are two like totally separate species. And I think it's called a wolfin, like a dolphin and a whale. And then you have narwhals, which are those cool whales with I think they're whales with the unicorn spike on them. They often, or not often, but they have interbred with beluga whales. So those are the examples of kinds. So when you read this, and this is really important that we get this foundation down, because we're going to get into some heavy stuff. We're about to get into the creation of man, and the creation of man is so important that you understand that you're created by God. And I can't wait to get into it, but you have to believe, before we can even talk about man, you have to believe that the animals on the earth are broken down by kind. That evolution is not real. It is not a thing. Right? The iguanas on Galapagos are a different color and they learn to swim. That does not make them any different, xylophone-wise, from the iguanas in Florida. right? And so once you get this down, you start to read this, you start to understand what is happening here. And you see, God is going in order of importance. And so on day one, he does a couple little things. He does a couple little things. Sorry, God, for taking credit for you. He's like, oh, there's light, yay. And then, the earth was kind of formed. And then, you know, day three's making mountains come out of the ocean and separating oceans and stuff. And day four, we're putting the heavens together with the moon and creating tides and seasons, and we tilt the earth a little bit so that we have summer and winter, and that creates wind and weather patterns, and all this cool stuff is taking place. And day five, he's like, here come the animals, let's go, right? and he puts together the animals in the air and the animals in the ocean, and that was the end of the fifth day. And then on the sixth day, he creates the land animals. And the reason why this is so important, that it's done in this order, because it's building up to something more important, which is the creation of man. So the creation of man took place after all of the other animals were created. Now this also means that the animals that we find in bone form, like in fossils or on cave pictures, or we read about in books, or we see in tile mosaics, they existed on Earth with man. And that's part of the young Earth model that we are going to get into after we go over the creation of man. But once you have this kinds thing down, I don't want you to forget about the xylophone, okay? A xylophone will always be a xylophone, no matter what order you put the bars in, no matter what color they are, even if there's one missing. It's still a xylophone. So all the animals are created in kind, straightforward, okay? That's why birds can, crossbreed, all of that stuff. Get that set in your mind, and next week we will get into human creation. So we end tonight in verse 25. God made the beasts of the earth after their kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creeps on the ground after his kind. And God saw that it was good. It served his purpose. And that's it for tonight. I wanted to keep it, light and hopefully fun and interesting. And I'm trying to get better with this thing. I apologize for being muted the first 3 minutes or whatever. I don't even care. Hope you had a good time. Next week we will do creation part 3, and I look forward to seeing you then.